Hello, Diane. How are you? Angelica, Snow White. Nice to see you all. Hello, Chris. I'm just going to start today with a few minutes of silence. Nice to have you here, Diane. So wherever you are, if you just sit still, and relax. We can enter into silence together. Nothing particular to do. Nothing that can be wrong. Just resting in silence together. Just relaxing in the experience of this moment. Being at ease and free. With whatever presents itself. I am speaking to you today from Lisbon, Portugal. I'm in the Alfama district, which is one of the oldest parts of Lisbon. And just FYI, I am recovering quite well from a broken rib that I suffered about a week ago. So I wanted to use the opportunity of our live session today to share a quotation with you. So I'm sure it's one you've heard. And maybe give us all a chance to contemplate what it means. Maybe more deeply than we have before. Hello there. Ahoa. Hi, Nancy. So the quote comes from a French Jesuit priest and paleontologist of the early 20th century, whose name was Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. And hello, Hosanna. Pierre Teilhard de Chardin was one of the pioneering thinkers who explored what is known today as evolutionary spirituality. He did it in a Christian context, as he was a Jesuit priest, but he was articulating how essentially the process of evolution and the growth of life in the universe is all part of God's plan. He was an incredibly influential thinker in the 20th century, and his most famous quotation is one which, as I said, I'm sure you've all heard. He said, "We are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience." Hi, Hosanna. We are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. I'm guessing everyone's heard that expression, that saying. You may or may not have heard it attributed to Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, but you've probably heard the sentiment somewhere along the way. So what does that mean? We are trained to think of ourselves as being human beings. And a human being, we are taught, is an organism of flesh and blood. Oh, someone said I froze. Am I still frozen? Oh, I am not. Okay, good. The internet's a little, so I may freeze periodically. Great, I'm clearly not now. So, what does it mean that we are spiritual beings having a human experience? We're taught that we are organisms, flesh and blood organisms, that have evolved into consciousness, into awareness. And occasionally, we have a spiritual experience. We recognize a spiritual dimension of life. So we're human. We're born in human form. We are human. And occasionally we have spiritual experiences. And in those spiritual experiences, we realize that there is a whole spiritual dimension to life, a non-material dimension to existence that we tap into. Teilhard is turning that around and saying, actually, we're a spiritual experience that woke up in human form. We're a spiritual being that woke up in human form. So what does that mean? What does it mean to be a spiritual being? Spiritual as opposed to what? Really, we mean spiritual as opposed to material. So we're not primarily a physical being. We're a spiritual being. This is what the quote says. Spirit is a great word. Spirit, our word spirit comes from Latin roots that mean breath. Because the breath was seen as the connecting point between the body and the soul, the spirit and the soul. You know, when you drink alcohol, they sometimes call it, and used to call it, spirits. We have the word inspired. We call alcohol spirits because they give us a different kind of life, a liveliness. You drink spirits, you drink liveliness, you get lively. You're inspired. It means you're driven towards something. So the spiritual is the drive, is the inner yearning, the momentum of life. It's not a body. It's not even a thought or an idea. It's more like what another great French thinker, Henri Bergson, called the élan vital, the life force energy. It's the yearning of life to live, the yearning to be alive. It doesn't exist in time and space. It's not a material thing. It's not spatial at all. It's a spiritual yearning. Everyone on this call, I'm sure, sees themselves as having a spiritual life, or perhaps living a spiritual life. What does that mean? It means a life guided by that inner calling to more. When we have a spiritual awakening, when as human beings we have a spiritual awakening, we're having an awakening to that urge for more, right? Can you remember that? Can you remember that time in your life when you first started to realize that there was more? You may have been very young, you may have been older, who knows? But fundamentally, up until that point, you believed what you had been told about life, which was some variation of you should be a good person, you should study hard, learn things, find a good career or profession or job so that you can earn money and raise a family of your own and teach them to do the same thing. Right? And so for a certain amount of time, that was good enough for you. It was good enough for me. And I went along with misgivings, for sure. But fundamentally, I went along doing the things I was supposed to do. I often think to myself that I was lucky because my ambitions were fairly moderate. So I achieved them quickly. I quickly had the life that I had been taught was the life that would be fulfilling. I had the career, I had the house, I had a wife. But at some point, I looked at all that and thought, there must be more. This can't be it. This can't be all that life is about, these things that I have attained. And that's when my real spiritual life began. And spiritual life is a life that's driven by the desire to experience more than what you were told was everything. And maybe if you're lucky to experience everything, the ultimate, to discover what life is really about. So when we are human beings having a spiritual experience, we are organisms in the human form who wake up to a existential dissatisfaction with what we've been told is possible and a profound inner drive for more, to realize more of what's possible. And ultimately, all of what's possible. And that's what our spiritual experiences and our spiritual life are all about. They're the recognition that we want to experience more of what's possible. Now, Pierre Teilhard de Chardin is saying we are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. We are non-material, energetic impulses toward life, towards possibility. We are not a thing that has that drive. We are that drive. We are the life force. We are the élan vital. That is what we are. We are spiritual beings. Non-material. Energetic movements toward more of life. And then we find ourselves in a human experience. We find ourselves born into a human form, into a human body. And so our spiritual awakening experiences as a human being are really a remembering of who we are. That's how we know that more is possible, because we came from that more. So as I said at the start of this session, I'm sure everyone has heard this famous quote by Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. And the quote is, "We are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience." I bet everyone's heard that. I bet everyone believes it. I bet everyone knows it's true. But this live is an opportunity for us to think about what it means that it's true. What does it mean that I'm a spiritual being? What does it mean that I'm here having a human experience? You know, it's not, the quote's very interestingly worded. He's not saying we are spiritual beings who became human. He said, we are spiritual beings having a human experience. I'm having the experience of feeling as if I am embodied, feeling as if I live in a physical world. But Teilhard is saying, I don't really. This physical world, this physical body, is more like a dream that happens in spirit. I guess today is the day of French thinkers, because another French thinker that comes to mind that I want to mention is Henri Corbin. Henri Corbin, who coined the phrase the Imaginal Realm. And he spoke about the Islamic mystical tradition in which we experience an inside-out view of reality, which is exactly what we were just talking about. He said that the way it works is you start as a human being who begins to look inside. Your spiritual search begins to look inside, and what you discover is that there is an infinite expanse of interiority, that in this physical world and in the form of this physical body, when you turn your attention inward, you find an infinite inner landscape. But as you keep going more deeply and more deeply and more deeply inside, you have that realization that the inner universe that we discovered is not inside the physical world. The inner universe was there first. The spirit was there first. We were spirit before we were physical. The physical exists inside the spiritual. That's why it's an inside-out movement. You go so deeply inside and you discover the interior of the physical world. And then you just go even further and you realize actually the physical world is inside the spiritual world. That which we thought was the inside is actually the outside. That's why it's an inside-out experience. And suddenly all of this physical, three-dimensional, material reality, as seen as existing within a spiritual context. And we are more fundamentally spiritual than physical. One of the things that means to me is that I was not born when this body came into existence. I was here before this body. And I will not die when this body ceases to function. I will continue. As a spiritual being, I'm not bound by the lifespan of a body. The lifespan of this body and my experience of inhabiting it is an experience that I, as a spiritual being, am having for what appears to be a finite amount of time in this reality. But from my spiritual being, from my infinite and eternal self, this lifetime of physical incarnation is just a momentary slowdown. It's like tapping your brake on the highway. You know, the implications of being a spiritual being, having a human experience, is that our life And the journey that we are on in life is much bigger than this one lifetime. We exist far beyond this one human birth. And I do believe we're here for a reason. We're here to learn. We're here to grow. We're here to give and to contribute. There are reasons why we're here. It's good to be here. It's not bad. It's important. And while we're here, while we have this incredibly precious physical incarnation, we should cherish it, love it, give everything to it. Knowing that it's a very brief moment in our larger life. Holding everything that happens in this birth in the context of the larger spiritual being that we are. Thank you. That gives you a completely different relationship to this birth. It puts everything in context. Context changes everything. So yes, give everything to this birth. Love it. Cherish it. Make the greatest contribution you possibly can in the precious time that you have to make it. And know that this is a very, very small part of your true, immense, majestic spiritual being. There are many, many adventures going on. Many adventures that you have lived, will live, are living right now. But in human form, our perception is focused on just this one experience of incarnation. And our spiritual experiences, in one form or another, always open up our perception to other aspects of our being. And suddenly, there's more to me than what I thought. There's more to life than what I thought. And that's when your spiritual life begins. Spiritual life is the pursuit of more. Everyone on this call is living a spiritual life. Everyone on this call I know is actively in pursuit of more possible, more possibilities, more potentials. Coughing with broken ribs is really hard. Hello there. It's one of my most unfavorite things at the moment. Coughing and sneezing. So why don't we sit again for a few minutes, and if any of you have any thoughts you'd like to share on this theme of what it means to be a spiritual being, having a human experience, feel free to type them in. And if not, just sit together. In the energetic glow of that insight. We are not human beings having spiritual experiences. We are spiritual beings having human experiences. Thank you, Supriya. I'm sure I will. I'm feeling better every day. Everything can be dicey from lower perspectives. Absolutely true, Coach Liz. Broken ribs are a fantastic opportunity to go slow. And to appreciate the miracle of your body. So nice to just sit here together with all of you. There is a transcending of both spirit and matter, Nancy says. Sounds powerful and true and intriguing. Feel free to type any more. Nancy K. Keith. Oh, that's great, Laura. It's a fantastic quote. In contemplating what brings me security, it is the realization of this quote, says Laura. We are not human beings. We are not a human being, I think is the actual quote. We are not a human being having a spiritual experience. We are a spiritual being having a human experience. If we knew, if we experienced ourselves as a spiritual being having a human experience, how would we be different? Would we live exactly the same life that we're living now? Would we do something different? Are there things we would change or not? Maybe not. Maybe this is exactly what we would do. Because maybe we know. Or maybe if we were a little more certain and a little more brave, we would live differently. We would do something differently. Interesting question. Yes, Lake Country Girl. How shall I live? It's one of those great questions to always have open. Never needing to be certain. Always questioning, pondering, thinking about, how shall I live? I would love more and worry less for sure. Isn't it interesting how oftentimes we know what we would do if what we believed were actually true, and yet it's still hard to do it. We're still conditioned in the matrix of the dominant paradigm. That's all part of the work, part of the navigation between what we know in our hearts is true and the way we would live if somehow that were supported. And on the other hand, what our culture will support and allow. Open for all. Beautiful, Angelica. What do you mean by that? Open for all. I feel it. I love the stars. I assume you mean that the life of freedom and authentic spiritual expression is open. Open. Yes, Angelica. Very beautiful. I'm so glad to have you join me here, Angelica. No insight, no outsight. Beautiful. Well, and I think with that beautiful sentiment from Angelica, I will end our live. It's been wonderful to be with all of you today. And I look forward to joining you next Sunday at the same time. Hopefully I will be one more week recovered Much love to all of you. Thank you very much for being here today. Thank you. Thank you, Laura. Thank you so much, everyone.